Hey, I'm Mark,
Hi, Michelle.
and we are
Medicine
Medicine
with
with
the
the
Metals.
Metals.
Today we have Janine Nicole Dennis. They call her Miss Janine Nicole. And she has a company where she goes into the workplace and helps HR with consciousness and holistic practices.
Let's jump right in.
Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I am Janine Nicole Dennis. I am the owner and Chief Innovations Officer for Talent Think Innovations, LLC. I'm also the author of The Absurdity of Doing You, Rebel Elegance for the Evolving Soul.
Awesome. What an innovative concept you have here, bringing like holistical healing, psychedelic healing, all this
Consciousness.
consciousness to the workplace. I I think with our current situation we have, I think this is a beautiful thing. I thought about this like years ago, how we could do this. And I don't think it would have worked years ago, but I have a feeling it's gonna work now. It's I mean, people are waking up. So let's talk a little bit about what you do.
How you got started.
Oh, yeah. So I started in the HR space in 2004. I started off with a background in clinical psych, and then I decided I didn't wanna diagnose people, although I was really good at it. And I had a really good mentor back then that said, "You might wanna look into industrial psych. It's a growing field," and I didn't know what it just sounded very rote and not interesting, but what she explained to me was that it's the study of why people come to work, what motivates them to come to work, how to create experiences for people while they're doing something that they spend their whole lives doing. And so I was intrigued, and that kind of led me into HR. There weren't a lot of places that cared about industrial psychologists back then, because I was always more concerned with how are people feeling? How are people thinking? How can we make this experience of work more beneficial to people and not just like a means to an end? And nobody wanted to hear it in, 2005, 2004. It was more so like, "Girl, get to work and fill these requisitions and
Mhm.
shut up."
I
So,
understand.
I did my best, I think, along the way to try to bring a little bit of that sparkle and a little bit of that ethos to the work that I did, really just trying to refocus every place that I was on the human. I mean, I think that's what I've fundamentally always been interested in. I worked in regulated fields, highly regulated fields. So I was in healthcare for a time, I was in home care, and then my last stint was in the national laboratory system for Brookhaven National Lab. They're part of 12 of the national labs that do R&D at the federal level, um, and all the different sciences. So, and then after that, I got kind of annoyed with the way corporate was going and felt like I was being a bit stifled, and that is when in 2013 I sprouted Talent Think really to marry all of the things that I thought should go together. So, how what do people need to come to work? How are we resourcing them when they are at work? How do we help them belong while they're at work? And how do we create an overall decent experience because people spend half their lives working? And so Talent Think has just kind of been this organic evolution of things that I'm seeing along the continuum of human evolution. I've just tried to kinda evolve the business in that way. Um,
It's so cool. How did it change after during COVID? And do you now,
uh,
work with
yeah.
remote companies?
So the interesting thing is, I think I was always very remote. I mean, I was very in person before and I did a lot of traveling, but remote was always a thing in my world. So in 2020, when everyone seemed to be catching up to the notion that like now we have to do things in this way, that it was kind of like, okay, well, I've been doing this for a while now. I think the only thing that became a little bit difficult was I was doing a lot of well-being work, by the time COVID came around, and so I was going into organizations. I actually had, a contract with New York City's, various offices to teach meditation and breath work and mindfulness. And those have been in person. And I quite enjoyed that connection. Just sitting with people, doing it at a distance. We figured it out, but I wouldn't say it was necessarily the most ideal. I think I did the best. We all did the best we could with
So
what
can
we
I
could.
ask, are people coming back? Like you say you're doing these, you're coming into corporations or you're going to places. Are people do you have them are people enjoying these? Like, I can definitely see how this works. Like somebody coming off a nice experience and going back in the work atmosphere and like that implementing there. But how are people adapting to this when you bring it in? Like, go through something like that. Are they resonating with the spirituality part of this?
So, speaking from this particular work that I was doing within the New York City ecosystem,
Mhm.
I think that New York City had, for all intents and purposes, the best of intentions in terms of seeing things, or perhaps I don't know what the inner workings were, but I assume they surveyed their people to understand, if they were stressed, if they were enjoying coming to work or whatever. And I assume they got back some feedback that said, hey, we're really stressed. We need some outlets. And so they started bringing people like me in.
Mhm.
What I found in some of the agencies was, if I had gone in there and I had just tried to teach them how to meditate, how to be mindful, how to be still, how to tap into their inner sphere, I I don't think it would have landed. I think because I understood the world of work and I understood how disgruntled people can be and the work that they were doing, that in some of those sessions, I found myself having to peel back layers. So the first thing we did in some of them was I could feel the tension and I would say, "Okay, let's unpack." And so we would do this one exercise that I do in a lot of my trainings called, Today I Brought With Me. And so it's like a little red sack. And I give everyone post-it notes and I tell them to write down everything they brought with them to work today. As vulnerable as they want to be, share that. And so we would go around and they would share it aloud, because I wanted it to be a moment of team building too, for their coworkers
Mhm.
to hear
Yeah.
and humanize
Mhm.
what they came to work with, right? Because oftentimes when we're meeting each other in the workplace, we see someone, they may not be smiling or they may not say good morning, and we make assumptions. We'll say, oh, that person's not nice, or that person's mean, or she never says hello to me, but we don't take the time to think about what belies that. So in that exercise, I found that people were able to like humanize one another. People would share things all of a sudden, like, hey, I remember this one woman, she said, today is the anniversary of my daughter's death. And no one in her office, not even her boss, remembered or knew it. And she just started crying, and we all were bawling in
Mhm.
there and just kinda rallied around her. And so what happens is, as everybody shares, they put the Post-it on the bag and we pass it around, and then I kind of just have them do a deep sigh, we do a little breath work, and I say, "Release that. That's gone. Now let's be present." And it's not until we did that,
Mhm.
that they were then open to hearing anything I had to say. I don't think I would have been successful at all had I not been willing to, like, sit and have some of those sessions.
And so what do you do? What do you do to bring this mindfulness into your life? Expanding your consciousness, if you're comfortable talking about that.
I have to be honest, I mean, plant medicine's been a big thing. I'm a second generation herbalist, so I learned from my grandmothers, who are respectively from Guyana, South America, and Trinidad and Tobago. So I grew up being around them and being around the folk medicine aspect. And, when my brother and I would get sick, they would, cook something up, boil something, and suddenly, we'd be back to health. So I've really spent a lot of time studying and working with a number of plant allies, as I like to call them, really to ground Myself, I'm amazed at what planet Earth gives us to survive here.
Mhm.
There is literally a plant, I believe, at this point, and I haven't studied them all at all. I'm still a student in every way possible, but there is a plant, I believe, for or bark or something for every affliction of the human
There's a
spirit.
T-shirt that says, "There's a plant for that."
Well, we
Yeah,
can't
Yeah.
right.
we can't
Um
heal through the plants when they keep restricting them and letting us not allowed to study them, and,
Well,
you know,
that's the part. I
it's really
mean, that
tough.
that's the tough part is
Yeah,
that they know that these things work, right?
for
I mean,
sure.
in fact, there are pharmaceuticals that are modeled after things that
Of
happen
course.
naturally,
Almost
We
and
all
say
of
that
yet
them.
all the time. We say it
yeah.
all the time, like, I think 87% of all pharmaceuticals are in some form of plant form, so
Mhm.
it's pretty amazing. Can
They go to
I
the jungle and watch the animals and see what the animals do to
Yeah,
heal themselves and then go to those plants.
that
but,
too.
like, what you do this I mean, we're in such a judgmental society, but, like, what you do, I think, is so important because, people need to know about these things, and it's just an introduction, and I think New York City, I mean, I don't see that as the place to, like, do that in, but it's being accepted and, you know, like, here's what I like to know, like, you have somebody like a Joe Dispenza would go in doing, like, a seminar like this, and, people
Mhm,
are like, they're gonna like, you're gonna have a majority of people that are gonna take something away from that.
mhm.
So, when you're doing these, are you having some people get something and taking it away in this, like, judgmental society?
Here's what I believe. New York
Mhm,
City is a rough place to hack it, right?
mhm, for sure.
And I mean, it's a place that even for me, like, I'm not sure that it's any longer suited for me, right? And I'm born and bred here. But there are portals, I think, everywhere, right? And I'm seeing that
Mhm.
even here. Like, I've had this just great, I guess, resistance to anything New York because I am relocating soon. But I've realized in having to be here longer that there are portals, there meaning there are spots in which people are waking up and while they may never leave New York, they still deserve this knowledge, right? They still deserve the ability to tap into this sort of energy. And so I respect that. Like while my time's up, I respect that for what it is. I've had a lot of people after my sessions tell me that like they need more of this.
Yeah.
They hope that this is not a one-time thing. These agencies that I'm working with, just so you understand, I mean, we're talking about people that are doing child protective services. We're talking about the social workers. I mean, these are just like one session was literally in the Bronx, at a juvenile detention center,
Wow.
and I'm a very sensitive being,
Right.
um so being I thought the session was gonna be in the juvenile detention center at first, and just walking in there, the energy was so debilitating for me, but I knew what I was there to do. Finally, somebody comes down, they're like, "No, we're in another trailer," and I just breathed a sigh of relief because but if I'm feeling that, right, these are
Yeah,
other humans, they're doing this every day, like, I'm
of
just
course.
one person coming in there to give them a breath of fresh air. This is every day, and I went into it understanding once I saw the situation,
Mhm.
like, these people need it more than anyone.
Of course, that's what I was gonna say, that's where it should start, I mean, I think after my first few experiences, that's where I think it should start. Don't you think it should start with those broken? Like, those are the
100%.
people that I think if we can touch, it's gonna really affect so many more.
Yeah, I mean, there's no time in those agencies to be heavy on the soft skills, right? So I walked into scenarios where people were like, "Yeah, I don't like my boss don't like me, I hate this job, and, I don't know what you're gonna teach, but go ahead." It's like, it's almost like I don't know if you ever saw that, movie with, Michelle Pfeiffer, I think it was Dangerous
Minds.
Minds,
Mhm.
right, where she's like this bright, bushy-tailed teacher, and she's walking into this inner city. It felt like that for me, and that's a lot to cut through because I think when you're in this space of spirituality and meditation, it's very easy to be like, "Love and light, and everybody get along, and everybody be happy, and, be happy that you're alive," and that yeah, it's that, but for a lot of people, it just isn't, and you have to meet them where they're at. If you're doing this work, you have to be willing to meet
You
them where
just
they're
nailed it. If you're doing the work, it's that love and light can only go so far because you won't be doing the work. I mean, you nailed it. If you're
Well, I
doing
mean,
the
even
work.
when you're doing the work, the love and light comes and goes. I mean, this is all Mark and I do is the work, right? And not every day is love and light. I mean, that's just
Right.
life. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you earlier now that I don't need to, but I'd still like to touch on it is
Mhm.
sort of what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? Were you in this world of HR and doing what you did and realized the need was there for this, or did you go into it with the background of it? Obviously, you were born into this. Your grandmothers have taught you. I mean, that you came into it and then realized there was a need.
It's also kind of I don't know, I always try to think of things I'm a big Marvel fan. I'm a big fan of this concept of, like, the multiverse, right? Because I feel like somehow in the multiverse, things are always full circle. So in a way, to your question, like, HR came first, right? And I had a certain set of goals with that, but then also I had an awakening in the midst of that kind of brought me back to but then it almost brought me back to some fundamental things. It's almost like it felt new at the time, like, "Wait, I was in HR, I'm having this awakening, and now I wanna be saying these things and doing this type of work." But then in doing the work, you realize, "Well, wait, no, I've been this way all along, and actually I've always been trying to do this. It may not have seemed big or like what I'm trying to do now, but I've always had this heart and this mind that was geared towards this sort of way of doing things." So that's why I kinda set the scene with how my education started out and how I really came into HR not caring anything about a policy or a program per se, but really just more so interested in, like, what motivates people? How can we make this worth people's while? Like, how can we help people figure out their purpose or make it more meaningful? But no one cared. We're now coming into a paradigm now, maybe as of I started seeing this shift probably about 6 years ago, where now people are like, "Okay, we've done all these things. We've talked about company culture. We've tried to slice and dice that every which way. We've talked about employee engagement. We try to slice and dice that a million ways. None of it's working. So maybe we do need to be talking to these industrial psych people. Maybe we do need to be talking to these other people that sit on the fringes of business, of work, to understand what we're missing."
Well, sure, because a common theme, no matter whether you're in the Bronx in New York City or you're in California or Arizona, a common theme is people are unhappy at work for the
Mhm.
most part, right? I mean,
Yeah.
work is looked at as I have to go to work. I got to go to work. I got to go to work because because of just that. They haven't figured out their purpose or whatever it is. So let's make the workplace a better place because a happier place, maybe find your purpose there. Maybe when somebody like you comes in and shows them breath work or mindfulness, that leads to the next thing, which leads to the next thing. It's a catalyst.
Because what motivates them is the money. Is that all that does?
Well, that I mean, we can't
Sure.
we can't shirk that. I
Of
mean, the
course.
reality is if we really, really wanna peel back the layers here, I don't know that our sole purpose on earth is to be working the way that we do,
Of
right?
course not.
So there's that, and
Mhm.
so, the fact that work is tied fundamentally to an economy, to how we're able to live, the level at which we're able to provide for ourselves and our families, that becomes the sticking point. I think a lot of people would make very different decisions if they had and I recognize the privilege I had, which was to say, "Listen, this doesn't work for me anymore. I'm gonna take this leap." It wasn't an easy one, so I don't see it as a privilege at all, but I'm willing to say that because I know we live in a society where it's seen as that, right? But the fact that I left and I had time to think, I remember the first few months that I was out of work, my brain just started tingling a different way, and I was like, "Wait, I have all these ideas. I don't remember the last time I felt this creative or the last
Mm.
time I had these thoughts." And then I thought to myself, ah, this is the reason why they keep us all on the hamster wheel, right? Because if we had time to think we would make all of us, we would all make very different decisions for our lives.
Of course. And then when the reality comes that money's not real, I mean, if it took just a few thousand people to come to that reality, it would really be destructive to society. If like
Right.
just a few 100,000 people comes to that reality that money's not real, it's going to be all over. It really is
Right.
because money isn't real at the end of
But
the
that's
day.
a hard concept, and especially when you come from I mean, especially our generation, right? You
But that's
just
what
like
we all
you
do.
said, when you start, you work hard. It doesn't matter about all this other shit. You go to work and you work hard, you put in the hours, and that's
Uh-huh.
what makes you a man. That's what makes you
Mhm.
successful. You grind.
Yeah.
It's just not true. But we're believe that. We believe that. And so it becomes our truth. It becomes true. You do. You
R
got a family of 4, you gotta go provide for them. You have to grind. You don't have the opportunity to sit and think. You have
Yeah.
to go do that.
But then you got another generation now coming up that doesn't want to do nothing. So now we're just in between
Right.
two
But
legacies.
you know what? And I'm raising some of that generation,
So are we.
and while there needs to be a balance, I also almost appreciate the ethos from where they come from, right? Every generation sees the older generation doing some things that they say, "You know what? I don't wanna do that." Gen X did it, right, with the boomers or the traditionalists who
Yeah.
were their parents. I've done it as a millennial, having boomer parents. They're just some things that I think fundamentally every generation is gonna say, "You know what? That doesn't look fun. I'm gonna go a different way."
And
Now
thank
you can
God,
Ri
right? I
and
mean,
thank God.
thank goodness that happens
Exactly.
because otherwise, how
Right.
are we evolving?
Correct.
It's good stuff, and more of this stuff should be brought into the workplace. I mean, because like the hardest thing for me to understand with this is because we need to bring it. We need to bring it to the broker. We need to bring it here. We need to bring it there. But then you become once you talk about that psychedelic concept, it really kind of whoa, people step back
Yeah.
and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, man, this is drugs," and it's so delusional to say
Mhm.
psychedelics are like how do you even like you
What?
can't even classify them as drugs because what they do is they're the totally opposite from a Schedule 1. I mean,
Mhm.
totally. I mean, no matter what you every way,
Yeah.
shape, and form, they're totally opposite. Iboga root bark, psilocybin, 5-MeO, ayahuasca, they all work in such a way to have you see yourself that there's no addictive property to any of these medicines. It's just impossible. And most of them, except for iboga, are almost impossible to die from. Like, it's impossible to die from ayahuasca. It's impossible to die from psilocybin.
Of itself. Of
It's
Um,
impossible to
itself.
die from
um,
cannabis. Now, boga, 5-MeO, there's some different ones there, but these are medicines that have been like really demonized. But so we really have to change the literature.
What we call
I
these
think
medicines, we
so.
call those the drugs.
Right. I mean, for me, I'm in the generation that came up with the just so say no to drugs. That was the whole thing, you know. I mean, these were called hallucinogenics as I recall in school, and there were after school specials about it, and so I mean, I held those beliefs too until I reached a certain level of my own evolution, right? Where I was able to see it differently. And I think that's the part is like, as much as I would love everyone to kind of like indulge and see where it takes them, also it's to the extent that they're willing to see themselves. And I can see after, working with several of them, how if you're not prepared to see yourself in many different ways, how it can send you off the deep end,
Sure.
quickly. I mean, there really is a ton of preparation mentally, spiritually, and otherwise that you have to have done, I think, to come through that successfully. Because the integration is a long one. It isn't just like, oh, you journey, you have a ceremony, and then that's it. For me, I feel like the integration is lifelong. There are things I'm still learning from my first journey, and I've had many more since.
We agree. We always
Of
say
course,
integration
it's a
is the
lifelong.
key. Integration's everything. The journey itself is, that's the smallest part of it.
Mhm.
So how does tarot and astrology mix in with your
So that I mean, those were things that kind of, I think, came to me as gifts, if you will. I mean, there's not any other way for me to say it. It's not something I just like picked up a day and said, "Oh, let me try with this." It was all kind of part of this awakening that I was going through around 2014. And these things just kinda showed up. I think I was always interested in astrology, but then I, like, let it go, and a lot of that had to do with my religious upbringing. I think I just got more steeped in that, but as I got further from that, um, I have to be honest, these things have been extremely helpful in helping me understand myself, how to see other people. So while I understand that lots of people don't think their sciences or even good, demonic even. I have not found it to be that way. What it has helped me to do is it's helped me to raise my kids. I can see them. I know their birth charts and I understand why they are built the way they are and why they do the things that they do. And it helps me, I think, to be a better parent. It helps me to know my partner. It helps me to, see my parents differently, knowing certain things I know about them. It's largely archetypal if you allow it to be,
Of
I
course, like human design. I mean, human design
yeah,
is something that's like, I mean, if you had everything in line, human design will line you up to exactly the archetype you are. It just
mhm,
lines you up to that person, but you have to have everything. And if you do, I mean, it nails it. It
yeah,
almost nails it to the T.
and it's not so much about being married to the archetype, although I think there's some things that are just, like, things that will stick with you, and that's just what it is, it's how you're built, and then there are other points I feel like across the chart that are evolutionary points, meaning they may be thorny, they may not be, conventionally exciting, but they're opportunities for you to learn yourself and to grow beyond it. It's the soul's knowing, it's the soul's growth.
Mhm.
And I think if more people understood that, I mean, we could get to work in a major
Of
way.
course, because doesn't it make sense? Like, believe it or not, like horoscopes line with like Geminis are Geminis and Aquarius is our
Mhm.
Aquarius. They just, I mean, really, in reality, they are those people. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's just not made up. I mean, it could be made up, is it? I don't know, but it just seems to all be in alignment, doesn't it?
It
It seems to
but
align.
I think here's the thing for me, I've been doing it a while, and
Hmm.
I wish I could say that it was made up, but
Right.
too much of it makes sense, too
Too
much of
much
it aligns. It's either
aligns,
that
right?
or I'm manifesting the hell out of these things, but
Of course.
I mean, it just hasn't failed me yet. There's never a time that I've picked up my tarot cards and pulled cards and wasn't either read for filth or told something profound that I needed to know. There's never been a time that I've seen angel numbers.
That's what I was just
Well,
going to say. Angel
right,
numbers.
or
I mean,
felt co and my angel
right.
numbers, we're beyond the 111s over here. I
Oh
mean,
shit. Yeah.
it
It's
gets
everything.
complex.
Yeah.
It
And you're
gets
like,
complex.
do I only see that or does everybody
Right.
else see this? Or is
I
I
mean, I'll be driving and
Yeah,
it's
it's
like,
crazy.
"Oh, wait, that plate, that license plate has a thing," and I'll tell my daughter, like, "Take a picture," and then I go back and I decode the thing, and lo and behold, I mean, honestly, there have been times, even up to recent, where I've decoded some numbers and read the message and been in tears
Where do you
because it
decode
was
the message? Tell us where you decode it.
so I have a book. It's a fairly old book that just, has the basic numerical scale for letters, for decoding letters. So like,
Okay.
with a license plate, it's going to be a mixture of letters and numbers. So all I do is take those letters, turn them into numbers, I add them, and get them to a number that intuitively feels like a number that would be an angel number. Most times it is, sometimes I may have to, like, add another number to condense it a little bit because there's no information out there, but ultimately, I know the resonance of every number. So I know that if I see 4s consistently, the ascended masters are around me, and I know that maybe I'm being called to be a little bit pragmatic with things or to create a certain semblance of balance in my life because that's what 4 connotates. Um I know that 3 is a divine feminine number, right? I know that 1 is new beginnings. I know that 2 has a lot to do with duality and love and partnership. So, I mean, I've studied it enough, but the point is never a time when I have decoded those numbers and not been in awe, like, What is this? Like, how is this reaching me in this moment when I need it the most?"
They're interesting. Angel numbers are very like, hmm, they just they're
They're
very peculiar
everywhere.
because they pop up like I just wonder if I'm the only one that sees them. You know, my wife sees them, but we each see them. But, I don't does my mom observe them? Or my sister? Do you get it? I
I
don't
think
know.
they're
So weird.
there. I wanna think they've always been there and just, like, when it's time for you to tune in or when you're tapped into that
Or is
frequency,
it
Yeah,
dinner
yeah,
time?
yeah.
then you're tapped into right. I mean, when I first started seeing them, this was, like, 2014, no one was talking about angel numbers, not in mainstream, so I thought I was losing my mind.
Well, you were doing some pretty radical things in 2014. I mean, to leave your job, that's when you left your job and started your
Yeah.
company now, okay? So
Mhm.
so to do that, that's pretty radical in and of itself, especially back then as a
Yeah.
woman, as a Black woman. I mean, it's a big deal what you've
With a
done
mortgage.
with a mortgage and couple of kids and all the
Mhm.
things, right?
Mhm.
And like it's not easy. It's not
No.
easy. And now here you go on I mean, you've been doing this a long time.
I
It's
just
pretty
made
amazing.
12 years with the business 5 days ago, but yeah, I mean, I and yet I chalk it all up to, like, something beyond me. I mean, I know I've done the work, right? Like, I know, but when I think about how difficult all those things were, and we're leaving out a lot of the story too, like, I don't I know something else had me, right? There's no way I would have survived unless there was a higher power governing these things, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I get that. I totally get that. Well, have okay, so going back to one of these places like in New York City in the Bronx and
Mhm.
you went into these juvenile places, have people come further with you and explored further into even plant medicines? I'll tell you a story really quick. We help people with microdosing psilocybin. And I had 2 sisters, and they were from the Bronx. They were amazing. They're 2 of my favorite women. I love their accents, I love everything about them, okay? They had never in their lives done anything like this. Never, ever, ever, and were very nervous about microdosing, and when we talked about it, I was telling them, eventually you're gonna wanna go deeper. It always happens. The mushrooms call you, the whole thing, and, "Oh, we would never do that. Like, microdosing is more than enough." Within 3 months, they were calling me, they were going on journeys. I mean, one of them had gone into such a deep journey, and she called it she had been living in the concrete jungle her whole life, and in her journey, she saw that Mother Earth was she thought Mother Earth was suffering, and Mother Earth was telling her that she can take care of herself, and she wrote this whole poem about it to our community, and it was incredible. I could start crying thinking about it, but the
Mhm.
transformation that took place with these 2 sisters from New York City who they never imagined they would do something like this, and their lives are totally transformed.
So, in all honesty, I wish that I could have seen that level of transformation. The way that my work with them was structured was very like, you come, you do the thing, but you don't get too involved. So I don't have a sense the other than the people that went through my course with me, those people I can say I definitely saw a difference between especially the people that just didn't believe it was gonna do anything for them. They were kind of like I had people who were said that they were afraid of what meditation did, because they don't like the dark, and it just felt like the dark and the void, and then I had other people that felt like they just couldn't quiet their minds at all, and then by the end felt like they had practical measures to attack it because for me, it's always about being practical, and meeting people where they're at. You can tell somebody, "Yeah, go meditate." What does that mean for someone whose mind is busy all the time and can't seem to carve out a space in their head, right, to do this? So I try to give them, like I took them through a bigger experience, but I try to give them bite-size ways daily to just start implementing, right? And that may not so what that might look like is, hey, if there's a day where you physically can't sit there and be still, maybe your meditation is a walk at lunch, right? Maybe you're journaling. Um, maybe you set up some self-care time, like whatever that looks like. All of that to me is meditation. It's you're taking time to be with yourself, which is a thing that's super foreign to a lot of people,
Yeah,
right? That's what
of
we're
course.
aiming to do. So I think once you take it out of the context of where people feel like they've got to be in a yoga pose,
Right.
proper posture,
Yeah.
with it, you have to make it palatable for them, and then I think once they take those steps, then the bigger thing of really, being still in that way doesn't seem so insurmountable.
Of course, and, the thing that makes it unforeign and the catalyst to all that is psychedelics, at least for me, was the catalyst to all that, 'cause you would sit there and you tell me to do this, 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 there's no way I would have been able to understand 10 years ago what you're telling me to do. I couldn't have done it, my monkey mind was just so whacked out
Yeah.
until psychedelics, until ayahuasca, and then it was after that, and it was after that. Once something worked for me, and I think this is the point for all this, is like, I think when we get to these deeper points, we start getting older in life and things don't work, medicines don't work, alcohol doesn't work, drugs don't work. Something works. Psychedelics worked, and when they worked, I kept saying, "Well, if that worked, this is gonna work, and this is gonna work," and then it just became natural for me that we don't sit around and do psychedelics all the time, but you know what? If I'm 6, 7 months and I'm feeling a little rusty, I might go do an ayahuasca experience, or I might do a deep journey with mushrooms. I'm gonna know that I'm gonna get something out of this, and there's no there's no better rejuvenation for me to understand that.
There's so much healing in it. I mean,
For
when
sure.
you think about, like, what we're faced with now. I mean, we don't know how it was in older times, like the Great Depression, things like that, but I would say that there is so much tugging at our attention all the time now. It's sickening, actually, right? And so having something that can just ground you and also take a lot of, for me, psychedelics was a thing of like my fear factor was diminished big time. It was almost like I'd been taken to such heights and depths that it was like, "Okay, none of this crap matters, actually. I understand what matters." So I don't feel like when I'm deep in that work, I don't feel jostled about, right? Which is what a lot of people feel. That's where the fear comes from. That's where the disease comes from, dis-ease in the body. That's where the emotional afflictions come from. It's all connected.
Let me ask you this, because I believe that 100%. Disease of the mind is disease in the body. I mean, we believe that 100%. So where my confusion comes in, and I've been doing this for about 7 years, was my first ayahuasca experience, but, walking a spiritual path, or thought I was walking a spiritual path, for about 25 years before that. And so here's where I get confused, is what happens to somebody like Ram Dass, who develops a disease, or a very good friend of ours who was his whole work is put towards spiritual work and doing the work, and he got sick and died. It was just wild. And I know there's a great beyond, and there's many, many answers, and listen, I take journeys to try to figure these out, but I want to hear your view.
Yeah, I wish I could say I knew for sure, but I would say that I think that we are all embodiment, some sort of embodiment of source, or some way that that which is trying to understand itself, right? Through each of us. And I think, we have our lessons, and there's this divine fabric we all weave together, and when your end of the thread is done, your end of the thread on this plane is done. That's what I've come to. I don't know that that's the, the answer to it all, but I feel that that's what is at play.
Yeah, well, I don't think any of us have the answer. We're not gonna really know till we go, but,
Right.
And we're not
you
gonna
know,
know then,
what
because
but
who are we
And we
gonna
may
tell?
we get an
right.
idea from these journeys, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
it's very similar. I just watched another documentary the other day, which I'd seen one on Netflix about the near death experience, and it's a very similar experience to a DMT experience, very similar from what people who have gone through it have said. So I think that it gives us an understanding. Some people say it's taken away their fear of death. It has definitely not taken away mine. But it's
Right.
changed it. It's changed it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that this dance is ever done. I think that's the other thing I've come with, right? Like, so that I mean, because I do tend to have these otherworldly connections, whether that's to guides and to beings and even to ancestors and family members. I mean, the dance is not done. They're just on the other side. What the other side looks like, I don't know, but there's no good reason for me to be in this physical body and be told and also have evidence that they're still around me, right? I mean, what is that? So, the dance for me, I don't think it's ever done. It's just some of us, our work is continued here in the physical form on earth, and some of our greatest leaders, maybe at whatever point they've done all that they could do for us in the physical, and now we need them more on the other side.
Mhm.
That's the way
Well, the
I like to
universe
think
is just
about it.
way too big for their I mean, even if you're not a believer, I mean, you look up in the sky, it's just way too big to not believe there's something else. I mean, even if we just depart as energy of some sort, we're
Right.
gonna go somewhere because we're all DNA. If I go in the ground, I'm eventually gonna become a mushroom sooner or later. It's always just gonna become that, and that's like, the unknown is really scary. It's kinda scary to some people, and others, I think there's some big DMT experiences that we have seen that, and we're not
Yeah.
feared of it no more.
I mean, I don't know that I'm not looking forward necessarily to
No,
not being in my physical body,
of
but at the
course.
same token, even today, I could say, I'm pleased with who I've been and how I've expressed myself, and I think that's where people need to get it. I mean, that's the best you can do is if you can get up every day and say, "You know what? To date, I feel like I've followed my heart. I feel like I've done the things I wanted to do. I feel like I've been good to people. I feel like I've left, a mark with people that would leave me in their remembrance as someone that did good." What else can you ask for? No, not one of us knows when the plug gets pulled, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
So, what let us tell people where we can find you.
Yeah, it's important work
Sure.
you're doing. I wanna talk to you
Thank
about
you.
our own company, sometime. I mean, really, because you
Yeah.
want and, we have a very conscious company, very,
Mhm.
but you still want people to be happy and
Yeah.
fulfilled and find their
Mhm.
purpose within the workplace, and we as employers can help with that.
Absolutely. So where
Huge.
can we find you?
Sure. So website is talentthinkinnovations.com. I'm on social media. Well, not everywhere, but I'm on Instagram as Miss Janine Nicole. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me there, Janine Nicole Dennis. And yeah, I'm always happy to connect.
Keep doing what you're doing because this business is gonna be booming and growing, and you're
Thank
gonna be one of those we reach out to very soon.
Very
thank you
soon.
so
Thank you for
much.
the work
Such
that
a
you're doing. It's
pleasure.
important.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful day.
You too.